So I just had an interesting conversation with a husband and wife. It's a couple, and they're business owners, or they were business owners, and they were explaining to me how the economy has taken a huge hit, or at least they've taken a huge hit because of the economy and how it affected their lives personally, their business, and their employees. And it has a lot to do with the housing market and the fact that they were doing all they could to survive as a business with the growing obstacles that most businesses face with supply chain issues and inflation and weak political legislation and leadership. But they were continuously hit by, they started off with the pandemic. The pandemic caused them to see a dramatic, I think it was like an 80 to 85% reduction in their revenue and profit, which put them into a bind. And they pretty much went through all their cash, they went through all their retained earnings, they went through all their credit lines, everything they had available to them. And the only thing left to do at that point was to start selling off their own personal assets to keep the business alive. Yada, yada, yada. Long story short, they pretty much got to the end of the road and found themselves in a real sticky situation for having had tried to manage this problem, then push them out. They managed this problem up until about a year ago. And then they decided that, hey, there's no way that we can continue down this path. We're bleeding chips. We're losing money left and right. And they started to lay off their staff, which they didn't want to do. And then they pretty much became the only employees working with the help of their kids. But basically nobody's really drawing a salary. Nobody's really drawing a paycheck. They're just trying to maintain operations and keep things afloat. But then it put them in a situation where they were forced to sell their home, and they didn't plan on selling their home, but because of some of the changes that had occurred in the buyer confidence in real estate, some of the changes that have occurred as a result of the Fed and Jerome Powell raising interest rates to fight inflation, it made it much harder for them to sell their home. Prior to selling their home, they sold off a lot of luxury items. And they will admit that they spent a lot of money, but they probably could have saved more. They probably could have invested more. They probably could have been a lot more frugal and a little bit wiser with their decisions. But hindsight is always 20/20. They sold off watches. They sold off. I think the list was about 10 or 12 Rolex luxury timepieces. Rolex Presidential, Rolex Submariner, Rolex Daytona, and Rolex GMT. These are all in the list. Some special edition, anniversary editions, and a fleet of vehicles. They sold off Bentleys, they sold off Maseratis, they sold off high-end luxury cars and SUVs. And then they pretty much got down to the house, and that was it. But because they weren't anticipating selling, they ended up listing the house at relatively a bad time for sellers. And the house had to, in order to sell the home and not sit on the market for an extended period of time for which they couldn't afford, the home, I'm not going to tell you what the home sold for, but I'm going to tell you how much it was reduced in order to sell. It was reduced by $1.5 million to sell the home. So that can kind of give you an idea of how much the home value was, or the arena, the range of this home price. Granted, this is a somewhat unique market. Granted, it was a lakefront property, so you would think that there's some added value there for a lakefront vacation home, but it also comes at a bad time where buyer confidence and consumer confidence is low, and there probably aren't that many people out there looking to invest in a lakefront vacation property, multi-million-dollar vacation property right now. But that doesn't mean that the housing market has crashed. It doesn't mean that the housing market has collapsed. And I was actually speaking to Chris Igo. So Chris Igo has a channel. It's on YouTube. It's Living in South Florida, Chris Igo. And we're actually working on putting together a video for you guys to bring you some real world accurate real estate market, housing market, potential housing market crash information to help folks out there make better decisions and really know what's going on in the housing market. Whether you're whether you're a buyer, whether you're a seller, whether you're a homeowner or not, whether you're a tenant and you want to know what's going on in the housing market that could potentially affect your landlord, these things are important to know what's going on. The more you know, the better. You can never be overeducated or overdressed. So he wants to get together because there's a somewhat of a misrepresentation of what's going on in the housing market by labeling the housing market as bad, when in reality the housing market, the stock market, the automotive luxury market, the any market that has investors interested in the assets looking to purchase and receive returns on their investments can never really be bad. And here's why. Because the market is going to always be good for somebody. It's not going to be good for everybody. And what we're seeing right now, and what these folks saw, unfortunately, was a huge loss in selling their real estate, is that the real estate housing market is, in theory, technically bad, depending on if you're a seller, maybe. Could be bad if you're a mortgage loan broker, underwriter, mortgage officer, banking industry in the mortgage department. That could be bad for you, as you're seeing a decline in interested buyers, a decline in applications and mortgage applications, a decline in closings, a decline in just everything in general that has to do with the housing market somewhat settling down, cooling off, deflating, so to speak. And as we inch closer towards these half-price houses, I think half-price houses is a play on words too, by the way. But on the flip side, the housing market is theoretically good for those who are looking to buy property at reasonable values or undervalued, looking to make investments in these properties and not overpay, like some have had overpaid. Potentially, some people have overpaid. More than likely, if you bought a house in like the last 3 to 6 months, you probably overpaid, depending on what it was, where it was, and your negotiation skills and the condition of the property. But at the same time, why did you buy it? Because if you bought it to keep it, then your money's only going to be made when it's sold. So if you're not going to sell it, then it's a moot point. But if you bought with the intention of flipping and turning a profit relatively quickly, then you're probably not going to be able to pull that off relatively easily. And but the half-price houses, I think, is in relation to half price in relation to how much they increased in value, because real estate typically, historically, increases in value over time. So it's a sound investment. Many people have made millions of dollars in real estate and will continue to make money in real estate, whether it's through buying and selling, flipping, renting, whatever it may be, building, renovating. And so I think that we may potentially see a half price reduction in the increased values and appraised or perceived equity of some of these properties based on their recent sale prices. So for instance, let's just say there's a house that was worth $500,000. Let's just say it's a starter house. You're going to pay half a million for this starter house. And at the time, during the height of the housing market crisis, and the crisis really was only for those looking to buy, that house would sell for $700,000. So, it saw an increase of 20%. I think what we'll see with these half-price houses hitting the market is we're going to see that rapid, just abrupt adjustment in increased value of 200 grand cut in half. So that house now is going to sell for 600,000 instead of 500 or 700. And that's where I think that's where the half price could potentially rear its head as we see this housing market shift. And it all is market specific. It depends on the region and the area. It depends on, if it's a red state or a blue state. There's a whole lot of different factors that goes into this. And we're gonna touch on that, because if you're saying the housing market is bad, then potentially you're saying that you are a seller. Because for sellers, it may be perceived as bad, but if you're saying the housing market is good, then that means you're probably a buyer and potentially a real estate agent or a realtor looking to capitalize on these transactions and these sales and these opportunities. And regardless, if you think the housing market's bad and you're in a position where you have a home and you don't want to lose, quote unquote, lose money on it, then just don't sell it. Just don't sell it, because like I said, you're going to make or lose money when you sell. That's when that occurs. So, but I hate it that for some folks, they are forced and put into this situation where beyond any reasons outside of their control are forcing them and putting them in a position to have to sell a home now when they don't want to, and ultimately take a loss on it unnecessarily because of necessity. And I actually had somebody reach out to me and say that they were getting a new job. They were changing companies, but that required a relocation. And the relocation ultimately meant that they were either going to have to sell their house or figure out another solution because it's in another state. And they're like, well, if I sell my house now, I don't think I'm going to get what I want for it and what I need for it, because I just bought it not too long ago. And yeah, sure, I paid too much for it more than likely at the time, but I had to. I needed somewhere for my family to live. There was really no other option. And so now, what am I going to do? I can't turn down this job because the job market is tight as it is. This is a great opportunity for me and my family, but I also can't really afford to keep this house and get another place in another state. So we're working through that and considering the different options available to him. And but this is going to be probably a reoccurring thing for a lot of folks in a lot of different cities and a lot of different employment situations and circumstances, as hopefully people out there are actually trying to improve their income. And I'm not huge on working for other people and being an employee, but I am huge on making money. So do what you got to do to make that money. And if it involves you switching companies and climbing that ladder and increasing your income and ultimately putting yourself and your family in a better financial position, hey, by all means, please go do it. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of folks that are probably going to get the axe. They're going to get laid off. They're going to get terminated. They're going to get fired. But there's still opportunities out there for folks who want to excel and continue to climb and grow in their businesses, in their careers, in their finance, in their personal finances, in their business finances. And so there's two sides there. So it's not always bad. I'm going to do a little bit of a follow-up later on a previous video that I recorded for you guys with an experience that I had at Home Depot and some quiet quitting that I feel as though I was witnessing while I was in there trying to get a key cut, and how that relates to what I experienced at a nearby Lowe's home improvement store, and the similarities and the differences between the two. If you guys want to see that one, go ahead and give this video a like and comment below, and I'll get that out to you guys as quickly as possible. You guys be safe, take care, I'll see you real soon, bye.